alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to another episode of Who's Who Project 100 Profiles, brought to you by the Muslim American Society. I'm your host, Abdusalam Dawood Marshall, and we've got an amazing guest for you all here today. He's got a degree in mechanical engineering at MIT. He's currently pursuing a master's education at Purdue University. He's a builder, a seeker, and most importantly, he's seeking to put positive change in everything he does. Welcome, Brother Harith Morgan. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Now, for those of you who don't know, Brother Harith, he was one of the first P100 sailors. He's one of the OGs from the original cohorts, and we're coming in to check in on him and see how he's doing. But I also want to just learn a little bit more about his background. He's got an amazing background. Check out his website, harithmorgan.com, correct? You can see all his projects there. I want to hear all about it. But let's start at the beginning, Brother Harith. I understand you're from Brooklyn. Tell us a little bit about what was it like growing up in Brooklyn?
I mean, Brooklyn is what's up. Let's start with that. But and there's so much to talk about, but I'll focus on the Muslim community in Brooklyn. I think the Muslim community and the Muslim communities in Brooklyn are very special. I think New York being the melting pot that it is, there's just an incredible amount of diversity. So growing up, I was able to witness how different cultures practiced Islam. And so, and I would go to different masajid in different parts of Brooklyn. So there were masajid in Bay Ridge, there were masajid, in Park Slope, there were masajid in Manhattan. I didn't get that far so often, but, masajid in Bed-Stuy. And all these had different communities that frequented them. And being able to witness this influx of Muslims from around the world and indigenous Muslims, and understanding how we all practice Islam in our own way.
That's amazing. Yeah, that diversity that's there in just that one area of New York, and how that opens up so many conversations and seeking answers based on all that diversity of an understanding and practice of Islam. And as you said, even American Muslims as well as immigrant Muslims. That's an amazing and vibrant community you're describing there. And you really have quite an impressive story going from Brooklyn and then pursuing your education at MIT. Looking back on your childhood, on your upbringing, your early days, was there a big turning point in your life, do you think, that kind of set you on the path that you're on now?
I think so. Well, alhamdulillah, I was blessed to go to an Islamic middle and elementary school, Al-Madrasa Islamiyah. And so it's Islamic school, the first Islamic school established in Brooklyn, by indigenous African American Muslims. And I was in that school from pre-K to 8th grade, because that was the context in which I was brought up. All the teachers are really just like family to me, and there was a safety in that. My world was really constructed of people that made salah and that understood who the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is and was, and who understood the importance of being strong in our faith, right? Despite the context of, American culture. Turning point was when I left this Islamic school to go to high school, right? There's no high school in Al-Madrasa Islamiyah. And I went to Brooklyn Tech, alhamdulillah. So I'm going from the school of, all Muslims, where there's a time for the Dhuhr prayer, and then I'm going, and it's only about 200 kids, 200 students. And I'm launched into this non-Muslim school of about 6,000 students, and there's no dedicated time for prayer. And this was a huge transition for me. I mean, well, not on a personal level, alhamdulillah, I think I'm relatively personable, so socializing wasn't a challenge, but it was more of being intentional about my practice of Islam. Whereas before, the standard in school was you're Muslim and you're seeking to adhere to the tenets of Islam. But now the standard had shifted and it was much more secular. And I, especially as a man, I had to assert my faith because I don't wear hijab, so there's no clear indication that I am Muslim, right? And so having to be intentional about communicating my boundaries to friends or being intentional about making time for salah. So there were times that I had to go to advisors and ask them to shift my schedule because during this time of the year, I would have missed Dhuhr with these two classes back to back. And so it was just that transition of taking on Islam for myself was, it was a transition. It's a transition.
Oh, that's an amazing story, and it just goes to show how even those who are fortunate enough by the will of Allah to be born into Islam, that at some point in your life there'll come that turning point to where you have to decide for yourself your intentionality. Is this just something you were raised in, and or are you going to make this part of your personal daily life and that make that intention? So that's an amazing story. Shout out to Madrasa Al Islamiyah and that broader community and family for raising such an upstanding Muslim. That's amazing, mashallah. You mentioned this balance, right? Or this, you've got a new set of goals, right? You know, in your family environment, in the madrasa growing up, the goal was to be an upstanding Muslim, to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in the secular environment, the goals were different, right? The values were different. I want to pick up on that eventually. I want to come back to that question. But first, I want to hear a bit more about this journey. So you went to, this Islamic school growing up, high school, this turning point. From high school to MIT, right? One of the top universities in the world for science and technology, studying mechanical engineering. How did that happen?
I mean, firstly, it's all from Allah. I absolutely. I think my journey is truly a testament to the truth of Allah's promise. Like He says, He'll provide from you from whence you have no expectation. And I'll be honest, going into high school and even in the first years of high school, I wasn't thinking about which college I would go to. Alhamdulillah, I was surrounded by parents and siblings who valued education. So it wasn't a question of whether or not I was going to go to college, but which college specifically was, it was immaterial at the time. At the same time, however, I was surrounded also by, support structures and resources, afforded by my parents, and also just that Allah had brought into my life. And I think these are what made the difference. I remember there was a student on the track team. I did track in high school, and he was a very high achiever. And he got into all these prestigious colleges when he was as a junior, when I was a sophomore, I believe, or junior, I believe it was sophomore year. And I just asked him, what is he involved in? I wasn't necessarily focused on which school I would go to, but I do like to be prepared. So I was like, okay, when the time comes, I want to have options. So in order to have options, I have to position myself to have options. And so I just asked him for academic advice. And he pointed me towards this teacher in the school, Dr. Maxfield, and he put me in this summer program that gave me certain accolades that I think made me qualified for a program that I would do the following summer. And then the program that I did the summer after that was a feeder program to MIT students. It was Mostech online science technology enrichment program, something, but it was related to MIT. And actually, I should go back before that. I was doing this other science prep program, and for minority students, and they took us on a college tour. And we went to schools in the Boston area, and I remember we were on MIT's campus, and I didn't have no concept, but I didn't have much concept of where this university was in regard to world standing, but I was just on campus. I looked around and I said, "This is a nice place." And I looked at the chaperone or the director for the program. I looked at her and I said, "I want to go here." And she said, "Okay." There was no, "Oh, this is a hard school. You're gonna have to do a lot to really be able to get here." I mean, it was just having people who believed in me, again, a mercy from Allah. And so from there, it just empowered me to keep going. And when the time for applying came, it was just natural. And so I applied, and then I got in, and I attended. And so it was a
Alhamdulillah.
pleasure.
Alhamdulillah. May Allah bless Dr. Maxwell, your friend from track, the person you were touring MIT with, all those people who set you on that path. By the will
And
of
my
Allah,
parents, are
parents,
instrumental in absolutely all of this.
amazing. And again, the science and technology programs, so many blessings along the way. You also mentioned challenges, and I wonder, both in high school and in while studying at university, you mentioned having to sometimes assert your boundaries, right? That not being visibly Muslim, there were these challenges along the way to being a practicing upstanding Muslim in high school and then going on to college. Can you think of any challenges like that or moments like that where you really had to refocus and overcome that boundary or that barrier for yourself, or establish that?
Yeah, I think it's less about these really intense moments and more about the day to day. In high school, especially during the fall season, when I was doing track, but Dhuhr and Asr and Maghrib would come in very closely, like 10 minutes after each other. I'm in the middle of practice. And so it's like every day, it's a personal decision. Okay, I have to step away and go pray, right? And just making that assertion for myself and communicating, to my teammates, all right, I'll be back. Like, y'all continue the workout. And I think towards the end of high school, I was, the captain of the team de facto. I didn't actually have the title, but it was sort of like, okay, this is the workout. I'll be back in a second, right? And understanding that this was something that I was going to do and making time for that in my life. In college, obviously, there were a few more challenges. I'm not going to go into those details, but I will give a high level overview and say that being away from home, genuinely for the first time, you really have to assert what things you will and won't do, because now the world is open to you, and your parents are not there to reprimand you. They only know what I tell them, right? And so whether or not I do certain things or spend time with certain people is very much a product of my own choices. But alhamdulillah, again, I was blessed to have a wonderful community of Muslims around me at MIT. Shout out to the MIT MSA. Really beautiful people. And even people who weren't in the MSA, I think other friends that I've had from different circles, they're all very understanding of my individual pursuit of my faith. And they respected that. And I think that empowered me, just having people who respect what you're doing and who give you room to do that and don't seek to make you feel other for sticking to your own values.
MashaAllah. Yeah, no, it's so important. As you said, it's not always the big major moments of temptation or whatever. It's just those daily struggles and those daily habits and keeping them up, and those daily choices we make that make all the difference. And it's a wonderful testament again to your parents, and great advice to young Muslims and also Muslim parents. You can't protect your children from everything. Someday they're going to have to make those choices on their own, and so you better start instilling those values early. But also just the importance of community and helping each other.
Actually, can I add to that?
Please.
I think especially what you said about instilling those values early. I think, and going back to the turning point question, I think at some point I realized that I had to be intentional about my Islam, and that was more so from middle school to high school. But I think coming into college, it was another transition where I realized I also had to be critical about my practice of Islam, because you grow up and if you're raised in a Muslim family, your parents give you certain Muslim values and they say, okay, this is what Islam is. And you go, okay, I'll do my best to practice this. But, we do not live in the world that our parents were brought up in. And Islam has latitude. And so I think coming into my own adulthood, I was beginning to see that latitude and understanding that, okay, it is within the bounds of Islam for me to question Islam. And it's not even within the bounds of Islam. It's important that I do that, because when moments of test come, I have to be resolved in my practice. I have to believe it, right? And I can't believe something that I've never tested for myself. If the first test of your Islam comes from outside of you, you're unprepared, right? And you don't want to be in that position. And so just giving yourself permission to sit and think, why is Allah important? You know, what does it mean that all of creation is a sign for mankind? Why do I pray? You know, who is Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? What is his relevance to my life? What is this whole sunnah thing? You know, all those they sound like dumb questions if you've been raised Muslim, but they're difficult questions if you give yourself the space to really think about it. And I think we need to begin to do that. And we need to develop a culture in which we allow children to do that, and then have the resources to, you know, inform them or to guide them in that introspective journey. And bringing it back to, you know, what brought us together, P100 is just that.
MashaAllah. That is such amazing advice and such an important insight, just the importance of questioning critically on your own, but with, you know, surrounded by knowledgeable people who can help answer those questions for you. Because absolutely, you know, those questions are going to come at some point. So best that they come from within, as you said. That was just so beautifully put. And I want to maybe ask you to put you on the spot. We've got a segment in P100 Profiles called Minute to Win It. You've talked so beautifully about the importance of thinking critically about Islam, about balancing the values of this world, as well as you know, keeping sight on the hereafter. What would your advice be to young Muslims such as yourself, pursuing these difficult studies, on how to achieve this balance and how to achieve striving for success in both the dunya and the akhirah?
Bismillah. I would say it's important that we recognize the truth of the statement that, you know, Allah is powerful over all things. There's not anything that we have, that I have, that any of us have, that it was not a blessing from Allah. And so if we forsake spiritual practice in pursuit of material gain, that's actually not the most efficient way to get there. Let's be real. You know, Allah can give you any and everything that you want. And so I think it's important that we focus on worshiping Allah, and then we tie our camel by, you know, preparing ourselves. But we do that with the focus of pursuing Allah. So it's, why do I want to study engineering? You know, that's a question that I've had to ask myself over and over and time and again, and I'm still trying to answer that. But if the pursuit of engineering is for material wealth, then Allah may take that away from me. But if the pursuit of engineering is to be able to build society in a way that is pleasing to Allah, then even the journey itself is rewarding, right? And may benefit me in the hereafter. And any amount of wealth in the hereafter, in paradise, is more than the world twice over. So my advice would be to focus on Allah in everything that we do, to be intentional in our practice of Islam, and to always make dua, because Allah got this.
Wonderful advice. Again, it's that importance of niyyah, of pure intention. MashaAllah. And you raised a question I wanted to ask, and no, I don't want to keep you much longer. You're a busy man. Engineering. You mentioned about wanting to use engineering as a way to bring positive change in this world. First of all, where does this interest come from? Have you always been a builder, fascinated by mechanical things? And what are your long-term goals? You're studying a master's at Purdue now. What are your goals? You mentioned you've got interest in environmental sustainability. So where does this come from, and where are you going with these interests?
Full disclosure, my interest in engineering was born really just out of a childhood passion that hasn't gone away, alhamdulillah. I like to make things. So it's like, what major makes things? Mechanical engineering? Awesome, I'll do that one. And so I've stuck with it. As far as my current pursuits, I'm really trying to do something in this space of environmental sustainability because, we were placed on this earth as khulafa, as vicegerents, or as what's the best translation for khulafa? But
Stewards,
basically
maybe.
stewards. Thank
Yeah.
you. That's the right word. Where this earth is our responsibility, and it's a gift towards us, and it's really in a dire state. And if we look at the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's full of examples of how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was attentive to the state of his environment, of nature, of the world. And I think we need to revive that Sunnah. And so I'm particularly inclined towards environmental sustainability. And so my intention, inshallah, may Allah purify me in this intention, is to fulfill my task as a steward of this earth in trying to mitigate some of the issues that we're facing as a species, and to use my training as an engineer to propel me in that.
MashaAllah. Your training as an engineer and your focus as a Muslim on the importance and responsibility we have to care for this environment. I think that's so important, and I think that's a place where Muslims can and should and will continue to, inshallah, show leadership. At the end of the day, it's up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what becomes of this earth, but it's our responsibility to do what we can to take care of it. There's the hadith about that even if the hour comes and you're planting a tree, plant that tree. Take care of the earth, take care of your responsibilities towards the earth, inshallah. May Allah grant you tawfiq in that amazing ambition. And I can tell you're among the next generation of leaders, both in your field of environmental sustainability, engineering, as well as in Islam. And may Allah continue to grant you tawfiq in that. It's been such a pleasure and honor talking to you, Brother Harith. Again, check out his website, harithmorgan.com. You can see some of his cool inventions, the stuff he's building, and learn a bit more about this. Brother Harith, if I can put you on the spot, we often ask our guests to close us out with a dua. So I wonder if you would do that for us today, inshallah.
We ask that Allah purify our intentions in everything that we do. We ask that Allah guide us unto correctness and sincere faith. We ask that Allah make us true Muslims and true believers, and amongst those who submit to His will. We ask that Allah bring us what is good for us and take far away from us what is bad for us and give us contentment therewith. We ask that Allah bless our families and our loved ones and our friends and those closest to us. We ask that Allah bless this ummah and unite us upon goodness and allow us to pursue any and everything in pursuit of His pleasure. We ask that Allah unite us in goodness in this life and in the hereafter in the highest levels of paradise, in the company of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Ameen, ameen. Thank you, brother. We'll see you next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.